So LG and Samsung have been rivals in the mobile industry for a pretty long time, but despite producing some really great devices, LG unfortunately hasn't had the same level of success as Samsung. LG continues to live in the shadows of Samsung, and the LG G7 probably won't do a whole lot to change that. But it's always fun to compare LG's flagship against Samsung's, so let's take a look at the LG G7 and see how well it stacks up to the Galaxy S9 Plus. As a disclaimer, we're using the Galaxy S9 Plus because it's better spec'd and also has dual cameras, so the comparison is a little more fair, but there are certain aspects in this comparison where the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus are interchangeable. Now, because these two phones have a lot in common, I figured the easiest way to break this down is by similarities and differences, so let's start with what these phones have that are more or less the same. The LG G7 and S9 Plus have pretty much identical specs. You have the Snapdragon 845 processor with 4 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on the G7 and 6 gigabytes of RAM on the S9 Plus, but if you opt for the regular S9, you will have 4 gigabytes of RAM instead. With plenty of RAM and the top-of-the-line Snapdragon processor, performance is not a problem on either phone. They're both plenty fast and responsive, they're quick to launch applications, quick to multitask, and play all of the graphically demanding game titles on the Google Play Store with smooth frame rates. They both also have a micro SD card slot for extra storage, IP68 certification against water and dust, rear-facing fingerprint sensors, and they both come with a headphone jack. The most notable similarity is they both have a dedicated AI key, but the difference here is Samsung uses their own AI called Bixby, while LG chose to go with Google Assistant, which to me is much more useful. Neither one is remappable, but LG has said that this could change in the future if people really want it. On the inside, the LG G7 has a 3000 mAh battery and the S9 Plus has a slightly larger 3500 mAh battery. Both devices are capable of getting through a full day, but the S9 Plus definitely lasts longer with more screen on time. The LG G7 only gets me 4 hours or so of screen on time, which is decent, but it's fairly average when you compare it to smartphones that can get up to 5 or 6 hours. The designs of the LG G7 and Samsung Galaxy S9 are pretty similar. They're both made of glass on the front and back with a metal frame wrapping around the sides, and this is starting to become a pretty common design formula across a lot of manufacturers. The glass does make these phones fingerprint magnets, but overall I like them. They're very sleek, stylish, they feel comfortable in the hand, and the glass back allows for the G7 and S9 to have wireless charging. The S9 Plus is the bigger phone of the two, obviously, but if you want a phone that's easier to use in one hand or more closer in size to the G7, that's where the regular S9 comes into play. On the front, they both have gorgeous looking displays with thin bezels, but they're using different screen technologies, and the LG G7 has a notch. The G7's display is a Quad HD IPS LCD, and even though I prefer the AMOLED of the S9 Plus for its deeper blacks and higher contrast, the G7 has one of the best IPS panels that I've ever seen on any smartphone. It's vibrant, colorful, and LG calls it a super bright display because it's able to go up to 1000 nits of brightness, which makes it extremely easy to see in direct sunlight. The S9 Plus's display is also capable of hitting 1000 nits of brightness, so it's pretty easy to see outdoors as well, and if you really hate notches, you'll probably like this display better. I don't really mind the notch of the G7's display though, it doesn't really bother me all that much. It doesn't change the way apps or videos appear on this phone, and LG also gives you the option to hide it if you want. The audio experience has become a pretty big deal with LG phones over the last couple of years. With the LG G7, you still get the same great quad DAC that produces incredible audio, but now LG has added support for DTS:X virtual surround sound, and the single bottom firing speaker is impressively loud due to its clever use of the phone's internal space as a resonance chamber. Samsung upped the audio experience on its smartphone this year as well with the addition of Dolby Atmos and a dual speaker setup, but if you ask me, LG is still king here when it comes to smartphone audio. As far as the software is concerned, the LG G7 and S9 are running Android 8.0 Oreo with their own respective software skins, and I would say for the most part that LG and Samsung UI are pretty interchangeable. If you are familiar with Samsung's interface, you'll have no problems finding your way around LG's and vice versa. They have a pretty similar look and feel and offer a lot of the same features like always on displays, face unlock, custom theme engines, a gaming mode, and edge-based software for quickly accessing apps, music controls, contacts, and other system functions. I still prefer stock Android over either of these experiences, but LG and Samsung have done a nice job of tidying up their software within the last couple of years that I don't really mind using them. Last but not least, let's talk about the cameras. The LG G7 and S9 Plus have dual cameras on the back, but LG uses a wide-angle secondary sensor, whereas Samsung uses a telephoto lens instead that gives you 2x optical zoom. LG uses two 16-megapixel sensors with optical image stabilization on the main lens, and Samsung uses two 12-megapixel sensors, but both of them have OIS. What makes Samsung's camera a little bit more unique this year is the mechanical aperture. This is a hardware-based aperture that lets you switch between f1.5 and f2.4 to change how much light comes into the sensor and also the depth of field. It's a pretty cool feature and definitely something I hope we're going to see more of in other smartphones, because having a real physical changing aperture is a lot better than one that is software based. Now we can sit here and nitpick the differences with the photos from the G7 and S9 all day, but the bottom line here is they both take fantastic photos that the majority of consumers will be more than happy with. What it's really going to come down to is whether you want a wide-angle lens or a telephoto zoom lens. For me, I like LG's wide-angle setup better. It's really great for landscapes and group photos, and I feel like there are more situations where I would rather have a wide-angle lens than a zoom lens. I'm not saying that the zoom lens doesn't have its use cases, but very rarely do I ever feel compelled to use that 2x optical zoom. So with that being said, my pick for the winner in this versus battle has to go to the LG G7. Typically, I've always preferred Samsung's flagships over LG's, but the G7 has a few things that I like better. The audio experience, especially with that quad DAC, is still top notch. I like the wide-angle lens over Samsung's telephoto lens, and I like LG's implementation of Google Assistant over Samsung's Bixby. Also, LG has always been the underdog when compared to Samsung, and sometimes it's just kind of fun to root for the underdog. But that's pretty much it for this comparison. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already, and of course hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, and check us out on social media: Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Google+, all that good stuff is linked down below, and check the website as well for more in-depth coverage, AndroidAuthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.